Hi guys, welcome back. So this video is a description of the P-47D-30 by the pilot training manual for the Thunderbolt. The previous video was the description with the pilot's flight operating instructions, and now we are doing with the second manual. So let's go. The first thing is the turbo. So the P-47 has two superchargers, a geared device which is an integral part of the engine, and a turbo supercharger installed just forward of the tail section. The P-47's fame as a high-altitude fighter stems from the turbo. It gives the plane maximum performance at 27,000 feet. On the latest series, maximum performance is obtained at 30,000 feet. The supercharger's operation is quite simple. Air is compressed by an impeller, which is spun by exhaust gases blowing against the bucket wheel attached to the same shaft. The supercharged air is then forced into the intake via the intercoolers. An indicator showing the position of the intercooler shutters, panel doors on each side of the fuselage, here, is on the upper left of the cockpit. It is marked closed, neutral, open. The shutters, electrically operated, are controlled by a toggle switch on the main switch panel. On the D-25 and subsequent series, the toggle is beside the indicator, and in our case it is right here. Normally, you fly with the intercooler doors open, but in cold weather, you may need doors in neutral or closed to give correct carburetor air temperature. Doors must be in neutral for any speed above 350 miles per hour. A lever on the throttle quadrant controls the turbo. The lever regulates waste gate, which either directs exhaust gases against the bucket wheel or permit the gases to escape. When the P-47 is serviced with a grade 100 fuel, the turbo control can be interconnected with the throttle by means of a link, right here. So this is the turbo control. Disconnect the controls for starting to enable you to crack the throttle while leaving the turbo off, and at high altitude, when with the throttle full forward, it's necessary to pull back on the turbo to avoid overspeeding. However, when grade 81 fuel is used in training, disconnect the link below 7,000 feet. The precaution is to enforce the danger of exceeding allowable manifold pressures. About 7,000 feet, the link may be connected to assist you in remaining information. Disconnect it when you descend. When the link is not connected, use the turbo control as a second throttle. In other words, after the throttle is full forward, use the turbo to maintain the desired manifold pressure. The turbo usually is needed at about 12,000 feet. And when you are using the turbo lever, always push the throttle first and then the boost. Never boost and throttle. Same thing, if you are with throttle and boost fully forward, first you put the boost back and then the throttle back. Under no circumstances let the throttle get back of the supercharger lever, or the turbo will be damaged by building up pressures that have no means of escape. Your plane, depending on the series, has a turbo tachometer or warning light on the panel. It is right here for the panel and for the light. The turbo tachometer is redline at 18,250 RPM, so it is right here. Do not exceed this limitation. The turbo warning light, here, goes on the instant you start the engine. It glows steadily unless you use the turbo. In this case, the light starts to flicker and continues to flicker until a speed of 18,250 rpm is reached. Then it glows steadily again. When this happens, reduce RPM, the turbo is overspeeding. When using the turbo, the rule is to keep the light flickering. The D25 and later series have both a turbo tachometer and a warning light. The light goes on at 22,000 rpm to indicate overspeeding when war emergency power is being used. Now let's talk about war emergency power, as known as WEP. The P-47 has a tank holding a solution of water and alcohol to prevent detonation while drawing war emergency power. Series from the D5 on have the system. The capacity of the tank is 15 gallons on planes up to the D25. On this and subsequent series, the capacity has been doubled. On most planes, the solution is set flowing into the fuel discharge nozzle by a switch on top of the throttle, here. However, from the D11 through the D20, the flow starts automatically when the throttle is approximately 1/8 inch from full forward, which is not our case. Water injection increases the power about 15%, and when it goes on, it really gives the plane a boot in the pants. The water supply on the later series is sufficient for about 15 minutes of operation, so be sure an emergency is real before tapping the tank. Like ammunition, water should be hoarded until needed and then used unhesitatingly. You won't be using water in training because you don't need such power. Now, engine instruments. The P-47's giant power plant has the reputation of being the most dependable in the fighter business. It's still an engine, however, and exacts a customary penalty for abuse. You'll read G2 report of pilots drawing excessive power for long periods. These reports are true, but that's in combat, where engines, like everything else, are expendable. No combat pilot purposely abuses his engine. In fact, he does everything possible to conserve it so that the extra power is there when needed. To use an engine properly, you must understand what your engine instruments have to tell you. The P-47's instruments are grouped on the right side of the panel. Shown is a typical grouping. Different series may vary slightly. A word to the wise. Engine instruments provide an X-ray view of your power plant in operation. Train yourself to use them, all of them, and you'll receive advance notice of any impending engine trouble in time to take corrective action. The first instrument is the tachometer. It is right here. Records engine RPM. It is redlined at 2700 RPM. Normal operating range extends from 1700 to 2550 RPM. So from here to here. On planes with an electric propeller, RPM is regulated by the propeller control handle on the throttle quadrant when the propeller selector switch is in the normal operating position, automatic. If necessary, RPM may be regulated by placing the selector switch in manual or fixed pitch, that we have here, and varying the RPM by moving the toggle to increase RPM, decrease RPM. On planes with a hydromatic propeller, RPM is regulated entirely by the control handle and on the throttle quadrant. 2. Manifold pressure gauge. Right here. Records pressure in manifold intake showing power being used. Military power is redlined at 42 inches of mercury with grade 91 fuel and 52 inches of mercury for grade 100 fuel. So for us, it's limited to 52 inches of mercury. When using grade 91 fuel, normal operations extend from 25 inches of mercury to 40 inches of mercury. With grade 100 fuel, which is our case, the normal operating range extends from 25 inches of mercury to 52 inches of mercury. So it is from here to here. Minimum, maximum. 3. The cylinder head temperature gauge, right here. Correct operating temperatures are about 150 degrees Celsius on the ground. So on the ground you should be here. 200 degrees Celsius in the air, here. Never exceed 232 degrees Celsius continuously. The gauge is redlined at 260 degrees Celsius. Excessive temperature may be caused by A. Increasing the manifold pressure without an appropriate increase of RPM, B. Increasing power before increasing RPM, or decreasing RPM before decreasing power. This does not apply to slight changes in power settings used to remain in formation. C. Climbing at low speeds, especially with cowl flaps closed. Excessive cylinder head temperature usually are a sign of detonation. Inadequate temperatures may be caused by A. Dives with cowl flaps partially open, B. Long power of glides. 4. Carburetor air temperature gauge, here. Operating limits are 12 degrees to 35 degrees Celsius. Control the temperature with the intercoolers. So you control the temperature with these, and it should be from here on the blue mark. 5. Oil pressure indicator, here. Operating limits in flight are 60 to 90 lbs from here to here. Best operation is 75 to 85 lbs. When engine idles, pressure is about 25 lbs. Oil temperature indicator. Operating limits are 40 degrees to 95 degrees Celsius. Best operation is 50 degrees to 70 degrees Celsius. Regulate temperature with a switch on the main switch panel, which adjusts the oil cooler shutters. On a D25 and subsequent series, the switch is next to the indicator on the left of the cockpit. The indicator shows the position of the shutters as closed, neutral, and open. Here and here. Except in cold weather, the coolers are left open. Now let's go to the power settings. The P-47's engine was designed to burn grade 100 fuel. Overseas demands, however, have made widespread use of grade 91 fuel necessary in training. So we don't have this in DCS, and DCS is 100 fuel. The engine operates just as well on grade 89 fuel, but the critical limits are lower. Don't exceed the limits, otherwise you invite detonation and engine failure, or a damaged engine which will fail during some future flight. Maximum allowable manifold pressure and RPM using grade 100 fuel. I'm not going to tell you for grade 91 fuel because we are not using it in DCS. So for the grade 100 fuel, you have for takeoff at sea level 52 inches of mercury and 2700 RPM. To climb at sea level to 29,000 feet, it's 52 inches of mercury and 2550 RPM. At 33,000 feet, it's 36 inches of mercury and 2550 RPM. And at 35,000 feet, it's 33 inches of mercury and 2550 RPM. These settings for climbing give continuous high-speed cruise. Then cruise at sea level 32 inches of mercury and 2250 RPM. This is the same for 25,000 feet. At 29,000 feet, it's 30 inches of mercury and 2250 rpm, and at 33,000 feet, it's 28 inches of mercury and 2250 rpm, maximum in auto lean or normal operation. Auto lean is here. The minimum cruise is at sea level to 25,000 feet at 31 inches of mercury and 2150 rpm. It's continuous used below 25,000 feet with auto lean. Fuel consumption. The P-47 burns between 90 and 130 gallons of gas an hour during normal cruising operations, depending on the age and condition of the engine. The plane consumes about 25 gallons during warm-up and takeoff. When drawing fuel military power, the gas consumption reaches 275 gallons an hour. War emergency power, and even greater gas hog, it's up around 315 gallons an hour. In training, you will use auto reach, and a relatively high RPM on most of your missions. The reasons are: grade 91 fuel restricts the safe operating limits on an engine. These settings, although resulting in a greater fuel consumption, are easier on an engine and simplify the maintenance problem. Training missions are sufficiently short to enable you to use such settings without danger of running out of fuel. Bear in mind, however, that the habits thus formed are not intending to be your guide in combat. In these days of long-range strikes and escort missions, your major problem will be economic use of fuel. That means learning how to make intelligent use of auto lean and reduced RPM settings. Long-range cruising for maximum range is not a matter of guesswork, and it's not a matter of accepting the word of a hangar theorist who has a system that worked okay for him. For a given gross weight, external load, and altitude, there is usually one indicated airspeed which delivers the most miles per gallon. With one combination of RPM and manifold pressure, achieving that speed most economically. Your airspeed may be predetermined by the mission or by the formation, but in obtaining this airspeed, you must select the power settings that make the best possible use of your fuel supply. Don't guess all these values. Get them from a reliable source, as the pilot's flight operating instructions 0168BC1 or 0168BC1A, which is the one I have and from which I've made a description of the plane in the previous video. A facsimile of one of the charts is reproduced. The chart, while formidable in appearance, is quite simple. You can get the hang on it by spending a few minutes reading the instructions at the top and working out a couple of hypothetical problems. Time spent in study of the chart will be a long stride toward providing you with a round-trip ticket for each combat mission. So the chart puts science instead of guesswork on your side. Now let's talk about the fuel system. Gas is your plane's lifeblood. Study the fuel system. The position of the P-47's tank is shown above. The main tank is L-shaped, is below and in front of the cockpit. On series prior to the DIF-25, the tank has a capacity of 205 gallons. On later series, the capacity has been increased to 270 gallons. The auxiliary tank holds 100 gallons. The tanks, self-sealing, afford a secondary protection against enemy gunfire. The feeder neck for the main tank is on the right side of the fuselage, in front of the cockpit. The auxiliary tank feeder neck is in the right wing root below the cockpit. An electric gauge on the instrument panel records the quantity of fuel in each tank. The gauge is accurate in level flight only. It is unreliable for the main tank when the supply is less than 20 gallons. A correction card for the fuel gauge when the plane is on the ground is in the plane. Here. No gasoline gauge is infallible. Keep in mind fuel consumption and elapsed time when drawing gas from any tank. A fuel level warning light on the instrument panel, here, goes on when approximately 40 gallons remain in the main tank. There are no lights for other tanks. The hand primer is conventional, here, and to the right of the instrument panel. A fuel pressure gauge on the instrument panel, here, reads 16 to 17 psi when the engine is running properly. With the engine idling, the gauge should record at least 7 psi. Any other reading is a sign of trouble. Fuel is drawn from a tank by an electric variable speed booster pump and forced into the carburetor by an engine-driven pump. The fuel selector cock turns on the proper booster pump automatically. The booster pumps have an emergency speed controlled by a rheostat on the main switch panel to take care of any failing off of pressure. Normally, the indicator points to start and altitude. Here, start and altitude. To get emergency boost, turn the rheostat to the right until the pressure rises to normal. So these are the fuel cocks on series from the D15 on. To use the drop tanks, place the main selector on external tanks and the other cock on the tank desired. Time drop tanks. Fuel from the external tank is forced into the system by a special constant speed booster pump or on series from the D15 on by air pressure supplied by the exhaust of the vacuum pump. There are no gauges for the external tanks. Time your consumption, and when you figure a tank is about to run dry, watch the fuel pressure gauge, here. Switch tanks the instant the indicator oscillates. Never take off or land using an external tank. Use these tanks about 3000 feet and drain them first. You jettison the tanks by an upward pull on the T-shaped control handles. Each tank has a separate handle, here, here, and here. Drop all external tanks before making a wheels-up landing. Switching tanks. Never let a gas tank run completely dry before switching. Anytime the fuel pressure gauge indicates a drop, switch tanks at once. The best to time your consumption and change tanks before the pressure drops off. It's best to time your consumption and change tanks before the pressure drops off. Switch while flying level and with the throttle retarded to approximately 20 inches of mercury. Above 15,000 feet, use the fuel pressure rheostat to maintain pressure during the operation. If a tank has run completely dry, in addition to using boosted pressure, it may be necessary to prime until the engine catches on the new tank. So you prime with this. Once you have switched tanks, leave the selector on the new tank long enough for the engine to take hold. By switching back and forth, you create vapor locks in the system. Remember, don't forget to drop external tanks before making a belly landing. They catch fire. When a tank runs dry, the engine becomes exceedingly rough, emits black smoke, and the propeller tends to run away trying to maintain RPM. It's easy to gain the initial impression that your trouble is a runaway prop instead of dry gas tank. So, in short, switch tanks when the clock says time is ripe, when the fuel pressure here says pressure is dropping and it oscillates, and if the engine is saying that something's wrong. Take off on main tank. Take off on the main tank and fly for 10 minutes before switching tanks. Carburetor overflow drains into the main tank at the rate of 10 gallons an hour. Unless you provide space to accommodate the overflow, you lose the gas through the overflow vent. In flight, use the main tank at least 10 minutes each hour for the same reason. Break that siphon. Once gas has started through the overflow vent, a steady siphoning is likely. If not checked, you can lose all of the gas in your tanks. The procedures for breaking the siphon is simple. Once abnormal fuel consumption makes you suspect the condition or a member of your flight advises you that you are trailing gas, turn to the auxiliary tank here and draw fuel power for a minute or two. This develops a counter suction in the fuel system that does the trick. If not carrying external tanks, use the gas in the auxiliary tank first. The plane flies better with this load lightened. When the auxiliary tank is down to 25 gallons, here, switch to main, leaving the 25 gallons as a reserve. Let's talk about the mixture control. So, idle cutoff is for starting and stopping. Auto lean is for long range cruising. Auto reach is for normal operation, and full reach is when auto reach is defective. In training, auto reach normally is employed when auto lean is used to conserve fuel. Keep a close watch on the cylinder head temperature here. If the engine starts to overheat, shift the control to auto reach and reduce the throttle setting until the temperature goes down. Carburetor icing. Carburetor icing can occur at any time, winter or summer, when the temperature and dew point are within 12 degrees of each other. The P-47, except in cold climates, hasn't a carburetor header. A header is not needed to eliminate icing. Carburetor icing is evidenced by a loss of power, airspeed, and a decrease in the carburetor air temperature. To counteract, check to see that the carburetor air filter is in the bypass position and close the intercooler shutters. Here. If the carburetor air temperature doesn't rise to above 12 degrees, cut in the turbo supercharger. Apply the remedies as long as icing persists. The supercharger is not effective in eliminating carburetor icing with reduced power settings. When letting down from altitude, keep up your power and reduce speed by lowering the landing gear and using partial flaps. On planes equipped with a header, turn the header on when you suspect carburetor icing. If there is no ice, the manifold pressure drops slightly. If ice is present, the manifold pressure rises, then decreases as the ice melts. So in short, to counteract carburetor icing, first, check air filter control, 2. Close intercooler shutters, and 3. Cut in turbo if necessary. Oil system. A 28-gallon tank with pendulum installed for inverted flight is in the upper part of the accessories section. The filler is behind a cold door marked oil on the upper left of the fuselage in front of the cockpit. The normal oil load is 19 gallons. You can check it by opening a petcock set at this level on the tank. The oil coolers, an arrangement of split doors, are in the lower part of the engine compartment. The oil pressure and oil temperature indicators are described in the engine instrument section. So we've already described them. The oil tank pendulum allows 7 seconds of inverted flight. When the pendulum is functioning properly, oil pressure drops, then rises to 50 psi as the plane completes a maneuver involving inverted flight. If this doesn't happen, the tank is defective. Write it up in Form 1A. An oil dilution switch is on the main switch panel. Here. With this switch on, the oil is thinned by gasoline. Be certain the switch is off at all times except when actually in use. Now let's talk about the electrical system. The electrical system is built around a generator of 24-volt storage battery. An astounding amount of equipment, more than 25 separate items, draws power from the system. Under the circumstances, make every effort to preserve your battery. The generator keeps the battery charged if you use a little care, but it's not foolproof. The generator does not cut in until the engine speed reaches 1100 rpm. While taxiing, cut off the radio if it appears that your takeoff entails a delay of, say, about 20 minutes. Or if it's necessary to keep constant contact with the tower, run off the engine occasionally to allow the generator to recharge the battery. The radio affords a check on a weak battery while you are taxiing. If the radio goes out, that is, if full voice and static noise cease, stop your plane and run off the engine. If the radio comes back on, you know that the radio is okay, but that the battery is too weak for takeoff. Return to the line. In flight, if the ammeter registers 0, here, your generator is out. Don't worry about a low reading, it merely indicates that your battery is fully charged. If the prop starts to hunt in auto, your battery is weak. In either case, notify your flight leader and start for home. Propellers. Most P-47s have 4-bladed Curtiss electric constant speed non-feathering propeller. The diameter is 12 feet 2 inches. The propeller has two controls. The propeller governor control on the throttle quadrant, here, and the propeller selector toggle switch, here. The propeller control handle sets the RPM for automatic operation. Move forward to increase RPM and back to decrease RPM. The selector switch has 4 positions shown in drawing. So it's actually auto, fixed pitch, decrease RPM, increase RPM. Leave the switch in auto for all normal operations. In emergencies, control the propeller with the selector switch. A circuit breaker, here, pops out, exposing a red color when the circuit is overloaded. When the button is out, no current reaches the propeller motor and the propeller remains fixed on its last position. If your cockpit check, say that the breaker is in. In your cockpit check, say that the breaker is in. Propeller trouble usually is caused by faulty operation of other equipment. A weak battery, or one with corroded terminals, causes the prop to hunt while in auto. If this happens, place the selector switch in manual and obtain the desired RPM with the toggle. Cut off the generator if it is not charging. This prevents the battery from draining back through it. Return to the field at normal cruising speed. If your generator goes out, the situation is slightly different. You still have a battery which lasts about an hour when nursed along. Turn off the generator and the radio, using the radio only for landing instructions. If you are only a few minutes from the field, leave the propeller in auto and make a normal landing. If you are farther away, place the prop in manual and switch back to auto for your landing. If the switch breaker pops open, reset it immediately. Should the breaker stay in, otherwise switch to manual operation to obtain the desired RPM. It is necessary to hold the breaker in while manipulating the selector switch or no current reaches the propeller motor. Whether a reset circuit breaker will or will not stay in, return to the airfield. Something is wrong with the system. If the battery goes dead during flight and the failure is sudden, the propeller holds the setting it had when the propeller failed. A gradual decrease of battery output causes the prop to run away slowly. Catch the prop with the selector switch. Before landing, manipulate the selector switch to give you landing RPM. Even a battery that has gone completely dead should come up enough for this purpose. Check the fuel pressure before concluding you have a runaway prop. As a gas-starved engine loses power, the blades decrease pitch to maintain RPM. So when landing in manual, use 2550 RPM and 32 inches of mercury. This setting enables you to go around if necessary. Check the fuel pressure before concluding you have a runaway prop. As a gas-starved engine loses power, the blades decrease pitch to maintain RPM. If a runaway prop is due to the engine losing power for lack of fuel, the RPM returns to normal after the engine takes hold on a new tank. First, the prop overspeeds, probably flat against the stops, but don't let that worry you. The RPM will drop as the propeller governor becomes effective. Foot props. Some D25s and subsequent series have a 13-foot paddle blade type propeller. The props are either Curtiss electric or Hamilton standard hydromatic. A hydromatic propeller is actuated by engine oil, which is supplied to the system by the regular engine-driven pump. The control handle on the throttle quadrant adjusts the RPM. The prop is constant speed, with the governor holding RPM steady. The RPM settings used are the same as with an electric prop. When your plane is in a level flying position on the ground, a 13-foot propeller has a clearance of about 6 inches. The larger props have little effects on the handling characteristics of the plane, except for a marked additional thrust when throttle is applied. When cutting off an engine, always leave the prop control hand full forward, high RPM. Radio equipment. The P-47 has 4 radio sets: VHF, which is SCR-522, Detrola, SCR-438, IFF, SCR-695, and Pipsqueak RC96. The VHF, very high frequency, is a command set for voice communication only. The range increases with altitude. Mountains or other obstructions in the line of transmission impede or cut out communication completely. The sets control are pictured below. The 4 channels of frequency, designated by letters, here, 1, 2, 3, 4, are tuned by radiomen on the ground. To use a channel, push the appropriate button. When down, the adjacent green pilot light glows. Push the off button to break contact. Off button. The toggle switch has 3 positions. Here, T for transmit. It's not written here, but fully on the left it's transmit, in the middle it's receive, and on the right it's transmit and receive. The receive warning lamp beside the toggle glows when the set can receive and goes out when you transmit. So, the channel A is for plane-to-plane communication on local flights, or communication with controller in your own region. Think of the number of planes which are using channel A when tempted to charter. A plane is in serious trouble can be shut out by one pilot singing Mersey Dote. Channel B. Communication with the tower. All cross-country flights. Communication with controller outside of your own region. Communication with aircraft of other groups or commands. This channel is on the frequency employed by all VHF-equipped towers in the country. When talking with the tower, be clear and concise. Be clear and concise. It's the mark of a good pilot. Channel C is for homing. Use homing if you are lost or desire to return to the field by the shortest possible route. If possible, maintain a straight path above 5,000 feet while making your homing call. If you fail to make contact, try again from higher altitude. Practice homing frequently. The system provides you with an infallible navigator. Channel D is for plane-to-plane contact between a pilot practicing fighter instrument flying and his safety pilot, or for plane-to-ground contact with DF stations. The pipsqueak contactor, used in conjunction with DF fixing, provides controllers and intercepts officers with an accurate minute-by-minute position report of your plane. The contactor clock consists of a dial and 2 switches. The needle on the dial makes a complete circuit in 1 minute. For 13 seconds during each revolution, the needle passes through a marked-off space. In this period, a continuous tone is transmitted. DF stations obtain a bearing from the tone. You receive or transmit when the needle is outside the space. To connect the clock to the VHF set, place the switch in. Place the clock master switch at run. Keep both switches off when the clock is not in use. The clock is wound by turning the knob marked wind in a counterclockwise direction. The radio man ordinarily does this because the winder has no stop and it's easy to ruin the spring. The contactor has a header for use in extremely cold weather. IFF equipment is used to identify your plane to ground radio stations. This equipment is confidential and will be explained by the communication officer. Detrola. The Detrola, here, a receiver only, covers a range of 200 kc to 400 kc. Most US range stations operate within this limit. Use 1 to receive signals from radio range stations for training, navigation or orientation. 2 to receive transmission from control towers operating between 200 to 400 kc. This may be necessary if your VHF is out of order or the tower doesn't contain VHF equipment. The Detrola is located to the rear of the VHF set. It has its own switch and a turning knob. Switch, knob. To operate, turn on, and with the turning knob, move the needle to the face of the dial to the frequency of the radio range or tower you desire to receive. Check the Detrola during each flight by turning in on some stations. 2 types of microphones are used. 1. The throat mic worn around the neck, and 2. The oxygen microphone mounted in the oxygen mask. To attach the throat mic to the radio, set by connecting it to the proper lead to the right side of the cockpit. Here. Attach the oxygen mask microphone by joining the microphone and a headset plug to the receptacle on the lower right side of the cockpit. Depress the push-to-talk button to talk over either mic. The headset, used with both mics, consists of receivers placed in cups in a helmet over each ear, joined by connecting wires. When using the throat mic, connect it to the proper lead on the right side of the cockpit. For use with the oxygen mic, connect the headset to a separate lead attached to the microphone and headset plug. Then we'll talk about the oxygen equipment, but we don't need it in this yet, so I won't be covering it. All you need to know is that you've got to use oxygen from takeoff to landing on any flight scheduled above 10,000 feet unless specifically directed otherwise. Do not perform a high altitude mission alone. Now let's talk about the hydraulic system. The main hydraulic system, pressurized by an engine-driven pump, actuates cowl flaps, landing gear and wing flaps. There is an emergency hand pump, not in this version, for use if the engine-driven pump fails. If pumping fails to raise the pressure, there is a leak in the system. A hydraulic pressure gauge, here, mounted on the instrument panel, indicates the pressure when the engine is running. It also registers increases in temperature created by the hand pump. proper operation requires a pressure of 1000 psi. So here. The hydraulic brakes have a separate system. The hand pump is not connected with it. The system has no gauge, and the only way you can check your pressure is by the action of the brakes. If the pressure is down, you may be able to get slight increase by bumping the brakes, as in an automobile, but it won't last long. The system is defective. Landing gear control, here on the left side of the cockpit, has 3 positions: up, neutral and down. To move the lever, depress the button on the end with your thumb and push down slightly to release the lock before raising. Here, the lock is here. Before raising. Before you can raise the lever from the down position, you must also move a safety catch. Here. The wing flaps control, immediately behind the landing gear control, has 3 positions: up, neutral, down. The landing gear and flaps control levers are set at an angle of 19 degrees from each other to help you avoid confusing them. Series prior to the D10 contain a hydraulic flap equalizer. It's not our case, so I won't be covering it. And finally, flight controls. See, the sun is coming down. So the flight controls are the conventional stick and rudder pedal type. The pedals are adjustable. Push out the adjustment locking lever with the foot. So there should be an adjustment lever, but it's not modeled. And you should have a lever with red knob at the base of the stick to lock it too. Then you have the trim tabs control with first aileron. Only the left trim tab is adjustable. Turn the wheel clockwise to force right wing down. Indicator marked L, left, N, neutral, R, right. Shows the position of the tab. 2, elevator, here, and here to know where it's at. Rotate the crank or wheel clockwise to force the nose down. The indicator is marked TH, tail heavy, and NH, nose heavy, and N, neutral. 3, rudder, here. Turn the wheel clockwise to add pressure to right rudder. The indicator is marked L, left, N, neutral, TO, takeoff, and R, right. Be careful in using the trim tabs. They are extremely sensitive. It is difficult to overcome the tremendous pressures exerted by trim tabs improperly set. Have your plane in proper trim when doing any maneuver. So that's it for this video. Next time we'll be covering some pre-flight checklist and startup, takeoff, flight, climb settings, landing, etc. So if you don't want to miss this, you should subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, like it. If you didn't like it, dislike it. Share it if you want, comment it if you want, and we'll see you next time. Bye.